Hi and welcome to another story, and today we have part 5 of The Person Controller by David Baddiel. Continuing from chapter 28, A Shaven Gorilla. The Stones were late setting off for Rashid's party. There had been a bumper edition of Cash in the Attic on channel 765 plus 1. What channel is this? Eric had said when the 5th Cash in the Attic in succession had come on. It's the Cash in the Attic channel, Janine had replied. So, when they were finally on their way, Ellie said, Dad, can we go a bit faster, please? Yes, said Janine. Put your foot down, Eric. My foot is down, Janine. Right down on the accelerator to the floor. Janine looked at her husband's feet. It was true. Blimey, Eric, she said. You really are going to have to lose some weight. Which was why, when the Stones dropped Ellie and Fred outside Rashid's front door, the party was already in full swing. Fred had just rung the doorbell when they heard from behind them a familiar voice. Well, well, well. Oh, no, said Ellie. She turned around. There were Isla and Morris. Isla was in full party gear, a bright red mini-dress and high heels and long dangly earrings, and full red matching her dress lipstick. Oh, and her hair was at its most shampoo advert-like glossy and falling over her face until she tossed it back to make the well, 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 just that bit more dramatic. Morris still looked like a shaven gorilla. You're late, said Isla. So are you, said Ellie. Yes, but we're fashionably late, said Isla. What does that even mean, said Ellie. It means that we're late, said Isla, coming closer to her. But we look great. Morris doesn't, said Fred. That's true. I don't, said Morris. Shut up, said Isla. Even you, Morris, who looks like a shaven gorilla, look better than those two. Especially you, Ellie. Jeans, V-neck jumper and glasses, like always. Couldn't you have tried wearing something nice for the party? Couldn't you have asked Mum or Dad for some fashion advice? Oh, no, you couldn't, could you? Because your mum's a telly addict and your dad's fat as her house. That's true. They are, said Morris. Shut up, said Fred. The front door began to open. Oh, well, said Isla, I suppose that just means Rashid will only have eyes for one of us, as usual. As she finished speaking, Isla turned away from Fred and Ellie and turned her face on, which means she stopped sneering and gave a big, bright, toothy smile to the person opening the door, who was indeed Rashid. Hello, Rashid, she said. Hello, Isla. Hello, Morris, said Rashid. And hey, Fred. Hi, Rashid, said Fred. And who are you, said Rashid, looking beyond Fred. I'm Ellie, said Ellie. I'm in your class at school. Ellie, said Rashid. Wow, you look different. Everyone turned towards Ellie, and indeed she did. She looked like Snow White and Princess Fiona, and Joy from Inside Out, and all the other cartoon and video game heroines rolled into one, and yet still somehow like Ellie. Her hair curled softly around her face, even more like a shampoo advert than Isla's. Her dress was black and gold, and on her feet, shining up and reflecting the lights of the party inside, she was wearing the spangliest silver slippers. Everyone who had turned to look at her couldn't stop staring. She looked amazing. When, said Isla, who was really staring, how, when did you change your outfit and everything else about you? Ellie shrugged, spreading her palms and revealing one other item of clothing, a black bracelet on her right wrist, which Isla noticed, although she didn't notice Fred putting the controller back into his coat pocket. Chapter 29, Thor's Hammer of Bacon. That was amazing. Did you see Isla's face? And everyone else's when I walked in? How everyone took more notice of me than they ever have done before. Fred nodded, although he was starting to get a little worried about Ellie, who had been talking like this ever since they'd left the party. And I danced. I never dance, but I just felt like it. She whirled around, her hair whirling round with her. Fred stood back against the wall of the playroom and watched her for a moment. He was happy she was happy, but he was also a bit troubled. Okay, what about Rashid? Ellie stopped in her tracks. What about him? Did you talk to him? Ellie looked down at her hands, spreading them out, examining her fingernails, which were long and painted red. For a little while. So, do you think he liked your new look? Ellie looked up at Fred like he was mad. Well, of course he did. So, what did he say? He didn't say anything about it. He's a boy, he's 11, but, said Ellie, looking at herself in the mirror and posing like celebrities do for pictures at a film premiere, with one leg pushed out and a hand on her hip. He must have done. Anyway, I'd better change you back to normal now, said Fred, picking up the controller which was lying on the table under the TV screen. No, said Ellie, still looking at herself. I want to stay like this. Fred frowned. Stay? For how long? I don't know. I like it. Forever? Ever? Well, said Ellie, yes. Why not? Fred looked at her. He didn't actually know the answer to that question. One thing he wanted to say was, because you're my twin, and even though we're not identical, we're supposed to look and be similar, and now you're not looking or being similar. I'm not sure who you're being at the moment. That's what he wanted to say, but it felt a bit sad and rubbish, and besides, it was all his fault, as he'd done the changing. He'd invented Cinderella. He was her stylist. So instead, he just looked down at the controller, on which the blue light was doing something strange. "What's going on?" said Fred. "What do you mean?" said Ellie, still looking at herself in the mirror. "The controller. It's doing something weird." That finally made Ellie turn. She looked down at the controller. Its blue light was flashing. Not pulsing anymore, but flashing, quickly. She looked down at her bracelet. It was flashing too. "What does this mean?" she said. "I don't know," said Fred. Ellie picked up the controller. She shook it. She turned it upside down. "Does it mean the power's running out?" "It might. But how do you charge it up, or change the battery?" "I don't know. If you remember, that's what I said when you asked me when it first arrived." Ellie turned it round. The shiny metal plate reflected her new blonde hair and big eyes and larger lips, but there were no screws on it and no arrows, nothing to suggest that you could take it off and see batteries lined up snugly underneath. "Well, what are we going to do?" she said. Fred thought for a second. "We could go online and find the mystery man." "Great idea." They rushed into the kitchen in search of the family laptop. It was a bugbear of Fred and Ellie's that the Stones only had one computer, and that most of the time no one knew where it was. However, this time it was obvious, in Eric Stone's right hand playing a YouTube clip of Jamie Oliver making a bacon sandwich. "Now, officially, a great sarnie has brown sauce," Jamie was saying, "but I think ketchup with just a dash of Tabasco makes a—" "Dad," said Ellie, "what are you doing?" Eric Stone looked around. In his left hand he was holding a packet of bacon, as big as Thor's hammer, if indeed Thor's hammer had been made out of cured ham. He also had 4 or 5 frying pans piled up on the stove with various bottles of condiments, brown and red sauce, mayonnaise, mustard, piccalilli, and a jar of Indian pickle that no one knew the name of, and everyone had been too frightened to open up until this point. He was wearing a chef's hat and a large apron, straining at its back knot. It was a novelty apron that Janine had got him last Christmas, which had on the front of a photograph of a man's stomach, but not Eric Stone's stomach, a model stomach with a six-pack. "I'm just checking the recipe," he said. "The recipe," said Fred. "Bacon, bread, sauce. That's it." "Ah, but you see, Jamie, he's got a new way with bacon, bread and sauce. Ellie, what are you doing?" "I'm taking the laptop away. The screen's already got splattered with bacon fat," said Ellie, moving back towards the playroom. "Bring that back here." "No," said Ellie. "And if you rub the bread into the pan afterwards," said Jamie, "you get a—" "What did he say?" "What did he say?" shouted Eric, but it was too late. Ellie had clicked off the screen, and Eric put his head in his hands, which was a mistake, as he was still holding the 4 hammer of bacon. Chapter 30. Actually, it's not Skype. "It's not here," said Ellie 20 minutes later. "I've searched everywhere." She had. They'd goggled and googled everything. Controller, mystery man, man of mystery, nerd-obsessed, balding grown-up with little sunglasses who gets upset when you ask him questions. Nothing. They stared at the screen. Suddenly, a Skype-like sound started coming out of it. "Bing bong, bing bing." "Oh," said Ellie, "maybe this is him. Maybe it's found us." "Yes," said Fred, accepting the call. A window opened up on the screen. There didn't appear to be anyone there, just a blank wall and an empty chair. "Hello?" said a voice. "Hello?" said another voice. "Who is it?" said Ellie. "It's us," said the first voice as its owner. Sterling repositioned the webcam so that he could be seen clambering up on the chair. "Sorry," said the second voice, Scarlett, obviously, "but sometimes we're too small for Mum's webcam." She clambered up too, smiling and waving. "Is she there?" said Fred. "I thought you weren't allowed to use the computer unsupervised." "She was just in here," said Scarlett. She said we could use it to look up for some Christmas prezzies." "So you're going to search for something on Amazon?" said Ellie. Sterling and Scarlett looked at each other and burst out laughing. "Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear," they said. "I think not, Grandma," said Sterling. "The state-of-the-art site for the up-to-the-minute shopper these days is, of course—" "Pret-a-pick-a-mix," said Scarlett. "Mama Mammon, Shop Jock, Play Us Please, Londis.com, Buy Stuff. All fabulous, Scarlett, but the one we're going to use is—" "Look, I don't care," said Ellie. "We've got a problem. And now you're here, it strikes me that you two eye-babies might be able to help us with it." So then Fred and Ellie, after making them promise that they wouldn't tell anyone else about it ever, told Scarlett and Sterling all about the controller, and about how they couldn't make contact with the mystery man, or even find any reference to him anywhere on the internet. The eye-babies thought for a while. Then Scarlett said, Maybe he only appears on the laptop at school, the old one." "OMG! That antique," said Sterling. "It's so like our school not to have an iDesk or a Tech Hammer or a Pixonic 250. But yes, I bet Scarlett's right. It's so old. Maybe it was built by, like, a medieval wizard or something. Ellie frowned. Isn't the internet just a big thing that's the same on all computers, she said. If he's on that one, he should be on this one. Yes, said Scarlett, but most video game controllers don't control people. There was no doubt this was true. Ellie turned to Fred with a "what do you think" face. He did the "I babies might be right" shrug. But before they could carry on the conversation, Scarlett and Sterling's mum and stepdad appeared behind them. Oi, I never said you could use that to Skype someone, said their mum, who was blonde and had a Scottish accent. Yes, that is right, said their stepdad, Mr. Bodzarov, who had very big, thick black hair, a moustache and an Eastern European accent. I have warned you. You know I will have to punish you if you disobey your mother. Please don't cut our hair again like they do in the old country, said Scarlett. What? Said Mr. Bodzarov. That is not a punishment, that is a reward. No, I meant no more pocket money. Actually, it's not Skype, mother, said Sterling. It's FaceFace, which uses a whole different system. Scarlett and Sterling's mum switched off the link. Ellie and Fred laughed, and then Fred said, so maybe, first thing Monday morning, we go to the computer room and... No, I think we should go now, said Ellie. Now? Yes, we need to know what's happening. But it's Saturday, the school will be locked up. Ellie nodded and held up the controller. I'm pretty sure this has still got enough charge to deal with that. The Skype, FaceFace, bing bong, started up again. Fred sighed. Ellie shook her head. She clicked on accept. Hello, said Scarlett's voice, whispering. Hello, said Sterling's voice, also whispering. What is it, iBaby? Said Ellie. We had an idea, said Scarlett, after Mum and Mr. Bodzarov went out of the room. Yes, we thought that you could go to the school over the weekend, even though it's locked up, and use the controller to maybe... Yes, we've already had that idea, said Fred. We're going later today. Oh, said Scarlett. Oh, said Sterling. There was a short pause. Can we come? Said the iBabies together. No, said Fred. No, said Ellie. Why not? Said Scarlett. Because you're iBabies, said Ellie. Yes, and you call your stepdad Mr. Bodzarov, said Fred, clicking on end call. Chapter 31. No more questions. By the time they arrived at the school gates, it was getting dark. Ellie said to Fred, hold your hand out. Minecraft? Said Fred. Minecraft, said Ellie. She pressed the ruby button of the controller. Suddenly a rectangular object made out of blocks appeared in Fred's hand. It was brown with yellow at the end. It lit up. A torch, said Fred. Give it here, said Ellie. She angled it towards Fred to light up what they needed to do next. Fred held out his hand. Ellie pressed the gold button. A stone tool, like a shovel or a hoe, appeared between his fingers. Fred immediately started digging. Ellie moved backwards to avoid the spray of dirt and dust, but not for long, as Fred had very quickly, in about 6 big blocks of concrete, which flew out behind him, dug a tunnel under the gates and appeared on the other side. Ellie followed him. The walls he had dug were remarkably square and neat. She came out on the school side. Hold on a minute, said Fred. He vanished back inside the tunnel. From the other side of the gates, Ellie watched as he threw each block down the hole to fill it in. Don't want anyone falling down that, Fred said through the gates, or seeing what we've done. Yes, but now you're on the wrong side again. Fred nodded. Float me over. Ellie tutted, but she pressed the diamond button and moved the control stick. And next thing you know, Fred was gliding into the air, as if in slow motion, up and over the school gates and down again, to land gracefully next to Ellie on the other side. That was fun, he said. You're wasting the battery, she said. We don't even know if it has a battery. It's not flashing like that for nothing, said Ellie, gesturing at the controller. They had to dig another tunnel to get into the building itself. Then they found that the door to the computer room was locked. But Ellie had an idea. She clicked on the controller, and Fred held out his hands. A wooden plank appeared in them. Then another. And another. Fred arranged the planks against the wall of the computer room to form another door, which wasn't locked. They went in. Inside, the laptop was sitting on the table, exactly where they'd left it. Not a lot of people used the school computer room. It was displaying its screensaver, which was a photo of a smiling Mr. Fawcett at the school gates with a group of children and all different ethnic backgrounds. The twins sat down in front of it. They glanced at each other nervously. If we can't find him on this one, said Fred. I know, said Ellie. She clicked on the computer. The screensaver vanished, and there, in exactly the same room as before, wearing exactly the same clothes, was the mystery man. Oh, well, thank the Lord, he said. I thought you were never coming back. What, said Ellie? Do you mean you've been there the whole time? Yes. You're meant to shut the computer down when you've finished using it. It's basic environmental good sense. So, you stayed sitting there for weeks to teach us a lesson about how to help save the environment, said Ellie. The mystery man, who had been looking flustered anyway, looked even more flustered. He looked premium edition flustered. I've told you before, you're not allowed to ask me questions. Just like I'm not allowed to ask them questions. Questions like, why do I have to sit here all the time if silly school children don't shut the computer down? Or, can't I just go home for a bit? Or, can I at least go to the toilet? Oh no. Who's them? Said Fred. No more questions. Actually, mystery man, can we just ask one more question? Said Ellie. No, just one about the controller. No. Ellie shook her head and her mouth tightened a little, which Fred knew meant she was going to get tough. If you don't let us ask this question, we won't shut the computer down when we leave. Again, she said. The mystery man opened his mouth, possibly to shout, no, again. We'll never know because he then shut it. He opened it again and shut it again. In fact, this happened 4 times before he said, OK, one question. Ellie held up the controller. Fred held up his bracelet. What's happened to the controller? The mystery man leant forward, peering at them. Flashing. Yes. It's running out of power, he said matter-of-factly. Chapter 32. Nerd. Fred and Ellie looked at each other. OK, we thought it might be that. Where do we get a new battery? The mystery man leant back from the screen. Now that is a second question. Fred and Ellie looked at each other. Well, said Fred, I'd say that technically it's a subsidiary second section of the first question. The mystery man looked at him. A blueberry necondection of the schmest-section, he said, waving his arms about and doing a high, nasal, silly voice. Then, nerd, in his normal voice. I thought you were all about celebrating nerds, said Ellie. That's another question. It was a rhetorical question. Nerd! Look, Ellie shouted, suddenly standing up. Her chair screeched. Just tell us where to get a new battery. And, as you may have noticed, I haven't phrased that as a question. The mystery man, and indeed Fred, looked a bit frightened. Ellie seemed to have grown more than just the 7 centimetres added by the new look Fred had given her. OK, keep your new hair on. Ellie sat down. So, here's the thing. You can't get a new battery. Ellie frowned. Fred frowned. What do you mean? Said Fred. It doesn't run on batteries. OK, said Ellie. How do we charge it? You don't. Ellie frowned again. Fred frowned again. Sorry, said Ellie. That sounded like you said you don't. Oh, sorry, said the mystery man. Let me do that again. He moved his mic closer to his mouth. You don't, he said again, so loudly that it distorted on the school's computer's tiny speakers. So, said Ellie, that's it. It just runs out. In my experience, said the mystery man, leaning back in his chair, the controller lasts just as long as it is needed. Ellie frowned the hardest she frowned so far. Fred did as well, although his frowning ability wasn't quite as big as hers. What does that mean? Said Ellie. The mystery man sighed. Now that really is a question I'm not going to answer. Ellie looked at Fred, and Fred shrugged his shoulders. Ellie shook her head. All I will say is, said the mystery man mysteriously, many a nickel makes a muckle. A rolling stone gathers no moss, and there are 2 sides to every story. He left a long pause after this, a half smile playing on his lips. Ellie and Fred both narrowed their eyes. I think you're just saying anything that comes into your head, said Ellie, to sound mysterious. Am I? Said the mystery man, raising an eyebrow, to go with his half smile. Yes, said Fred. They got up and turned away. The mystery man's face fell. OK, I might be. However, they turned back to the screen. Yes? That new look you've got is very fetching, Ellie, but it'll soon be draining the power as we speak. Ellie stared at him. Then she looked down at herself, at her different from usual clothes and different from usual body. Really? Longer you keep that up, quicker it'll go down. Ellie stared at him. Then she turned to Fred, handing him the controller. Let's get home, soon as poss. Fred nodded, and they both turned and ran out of the computer room. Said the mystery man, smugly crossing his arms. I see that got through to them at least. Then the smug expression on his face faded. Fred, he said, and then, Ellie, a bit louder. You've forgotten to shut the computer down again. Hello? Can you come back? Please? Oh no, the screensaver's up now. Help! Help, I'm behind Mr. Fawcett. Well, actually the Korean kid holding the violin. Help! Chapter 33. It's got a flashing light on it. OK, so, change me back to normal, said Ellie, looking at herself in the mirror in the playroom. The bracelet on her right wrist was flashing. Fred poised his fingers on the controller. Right, do you want to say goodbye to it? To what? To that look, that version of you. Ellie turned to him. Well, for now. Fred's fingers remained poised. What do you mean? Well, obviously I might want to look like this again at some point. What point? Said Fred. I don't know. Whenever. Ellie, we can't keep using the controller like this. The mystery man was clear. If we carry on using it and using it, all the power will run out. Ellie narrowed her eyes at her brother. So, what are we saving it for then? Fred looked shocked. Me? Ellie laughed out loud. You? Yes, when I play in the final of the Bracket Wood and surrounding area inter-school winter trophy that the scout from Chelsea is coming to watch me play in. When we got this, who decided that what you want is more important? It's my controller. In what way is it your controller? I'm the one who's better at video games. I'm the one who wanted a new controller. I'm the one who does all the controlling. Fred held up the controller. Apart from now, and any other time you need me to make you look like Cinderella. Ellie stared at him. She took a deep breath. Look, it's both of ours, of course, but just change me back to normal for now, because we have to, because we know it's using up the power, and we'll work it all out later, okay? Fred thought about it. He wasn't sure. He felt they hadn't really talked about it properly. But he agreed that as long as Ellie looked like Cinderella, energy was draining out of the controller. So he nodded, then very quickly ran his fingers over the buttons, and Ellie's hair, lips, height, skin colour, teeth and clothes all returned to normal. She looked at herself in the mirror. Great, she said, although to Fred she didn't sound like she actually thought it was. Now what? He said. Let's leave it here and make sure we don't use it until the day of the game. She took the bracelet off and put it on the floor of the playroom. Okay, said Fred. Good idea. He laid the controller down next to it. There was a pause as they looked at the controller and the bracelet flashing together in time. What should we do now? Said Fred. Ellie thought for a moment. Maths homework? Fred looked at her, in her glasses, the V-neck and braces, and smiled. Yes, he said, and they both ran out of the playroom. A few minutes later, Eric came into the playroom. Fred? Ellie? He said. He looked around. Kids, he thought. When you don't want to see them, like when you're watching Jamie Oliver tell you fantastic bacon sandwich recipes on YouTube, they turn up and steal the computer. When you do want to see them, like now, when you're feeling a little lonely and dinner's over and the wife's stuck in front of the TV as usual, they're nowhere to be seen. Eric was feeling a tiny bit depressed. He had started to wonder recently if perhaps, what with Janine spending all day watching Cash in the Attic and Fred and Ellie spending all day playing video games, if they weren't really a proper family anymore. Because a family, well, they should do stuff together sometimes, shouldn't they? It's not as if there's anything I'm obsessed with that takes my focus away from the family, Eric thought. Then he thought about going back into the kitchen to see if there was any kind of special treat in the fridge, as he often did when he was a bit depressed. Perhaps the bar of bacon-flavoured chocolate that Janine had bought him for his birthday. Could there be any of that left? Oh no, he'd eaten it in one bite. Still, worth looking anyway, and then he saw, in the corner of his eye, something flashing on the playroom carpet. With some grunting, he crouched down on the floor, picked up the bracelet and stared at it. Quite a nice-looking one, he thought. He held up his hand and put the bracelet on top of it. He sat there, like a headband for his fingers. It troubled Eric a little that it didn't slide easily down his hand. It suggested to him that maybe his fingers and his hand in general might be a little podgy. Using his other hand, he began pushing the bracelet down. It wasn't easy. He had to force it over his fingers. He squeezed them tightly together to get it to move downwards. There was more grunting and more forcing, but eventually he managed to get the bracelet past his hand and onto his wrist. Once there, however, Eric wasn't sure why he'd done this. It hurt quite a lot. His wrist skin, that wasn't something he'd ever really thought about having before, wrist skin, bulged around it. He put his other hand on the bracelet again, with a view to taking it off. But now, it really wouldn't budge. It just hurt, and it hurt more to try and move it. So Eric did what he always did when he couldn't think of what to do. "Janine!" he shouted. "Janine!" "What?" she shouted back. "Come and help me." "What have you done?" I got stuck." "Stuck where?" "No, my hand got stuck on a bracelet." There was a short pause. Eric could hear just the sound of someone on the TV saying, "So, if we just scrape the dust off her bottom, you can see. Yes, it's actually a 19th century piece of china." Then the door to the playroom opened. Janine stood there, arms folded. "Right, so what do you mean, Eric? Is that a bracelet? Is that a bracelet has got stuck on your hand? Which is not something that would stop you from coming into the living room." "Sorry, Janine," said Eric. "Let me have a look." She came over and held up his hand. It's quite pretty." "Is it?" "Yes, might be worth a bit. Shall I call?" "We didn't find it in the attic, Janine. We don't have an attic. We live in a ground floor flat." "I know," she said, with more than a hint of anguish. "Do you have to keep reminding me?" "And I don't think it's an antique. It's got a flashing light on it." Janine sniffed. Doesn't have to be an actual attic or an antique. The other week, in someone's shed, they found a digital watch that was worth... Janine, it's hurting, she tutted. All right, go and soap up your wrist in the sink and I'll see if I can pull it off. Eric nodded and left. Janine watched him go. Then, in the corner of her eye, she noticed something else flashing. She bent down and picked up the controller. Eric, she shouted, shouldn't we be able to get TV in here, using the kids' video game stuff? What? You know, all their video game stuff. The Z-Box, the Play Center, the Nintendo B. Can't you get TV on them as well? She heard the tap go on. I don't know, he said. Janine looked at the controller. Of course you don't, she muttered. She pointed the controller at the TV screen and pressed the emerald button, while jiggling the control stick. In the kitchen, Eric Stone found himself no longer washing his hands, but crouched on top of the sink. Eh? He thought. But not for very long, because the next thing he knew, something even stranger was happening. And that is where we will leave part 5 of The Person Controller by David Baddiel. I'll be back soon with the next part of this fantastic story and lots more stories and videos coming your way very soon. If you would like to subscribe even, or hit a like, that would be much appreciated. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.